First of all, thanks very much for speaking to us. And to start, I'd just like you to tell us a little bit about yourself and about your career.
Thanks, Cathal. I'm happy to be with you. I've worked in the field of international economics and international politics for some time now. I work for the Australian government. I'm an Australian national. I work for the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development based in Paris. I also worked at the Asian Development Bank Institute in Tokyo, and I was teaching also for quite some time at Sophia University in Tokyo. But also, I've been a journalist on and off over the years. I worked for a magazine owned by the Financial Times called Foreign Direct Investment Intelligence, and now I write many blogs and articles, which is sort of a form of journalism too.
And has your interest always been in Asian development or world development? Or
Early in my career, I guess I was more interested in Australia, but over time, I became more and more interested in the world. And from an Australian point of view, the world really is Asia. You know, it's the most important part of the world for our economy, although, of course, the West is the most important politically.
and in terms of your career, what would some of your highlights be?
I suppose early in my career, that's the time when you're learning a career. And of course, that's exciting to learn that. Being involved in policy making, decision making by government, that's exciting too. But over time, as I developed more competence and confidence, the ability to take initiative and to discover new things and develop new ideas is probably the most important thing.
And have there been parts of your job that you really haven't enjoyed or lowlights, let's say?
Well, one part of economics is working with data and working with economic models. And that can be interesting, but of course, it involves a lot of what we call number crunching, which can be boring. But, no job is perfect. And so you have to take the good with the bad.
You mentioned that you've done quite a few different jobs really over the
Yes.
years. Is there one that stands out over others for you?
I found my time teaching in Japan fantastic. I was teaching there in a program for international students. I had students from China, America, Europe, Australia, some Japanese. And to be over there teaching these students and discussing with them was just really quite exciting, I thought. And teaching, of course, you have lots of freedom. Your syllabus has to be approved by the bosses, but once you're in the classroom, you're free. Whereas in a big organization, you have to follow the boss's orders and follow the party line.
You wrote an article for News Decoder.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to have a look at that and just see whether you could break it down for us. Give us a summary of what that was about.
In essence, it's about who owns Taiwan. Is Taiwan owned by Beijing and the Chinese Communist Party, or is it owned by the Taiwanese people themselves? Some countries are a little bit sympathetic towards China, but mainly because China is big and powerful and they're frightened of China. Other countries which are more self-confident have great sympathy for the poor Taiwanese people for whom it's their home and who are living there.
And if you had to pinpoint what's at the root of this issue, what would you be able to say?
Chairman Mao won a civil war on mainland China in 1949. He won that against the so-called Republic of China. So that was the People's Republic of China became the country under Mao, and he beat the Republic of China. Now, the Republic of China remained on Taiwan. Mao never got that. And so from the Chinese Communist Party point of view, gaining Taiwan is like finishing the Civil War. But the other factor which is key is that this is part of great power politics between the US and China. And so China would like to improve its position strategically in the Pacific by gaining Taiwan. And our American friends don't want to hand Taiwan over to China. So that's a key thing there.
And these sound like kind of big geopolitical concepts, which they are. But who is affected by this issue?
The poor people in Taiwan are obviously affected. I was there just recently, and it's a very relaxed sort of place. But for the Taiwanese people, there's always hanging over their head the prospect of conflict, the prospect of their country losing its democracy and becoming part of authoritarian China. But more than that, if there is a conflict over Taiwan between China and the West, that would really upset global peace and the global economy, and we'd all be affected by that.
And is that a real threat? You mention it towards the end of your article, but is that a real threat, the threat of conflict?
People debate about the threat of an invasion by China of Taiwan, and As Mr. Putin found out in Ukraine, invading another country can be pretty complex, and it's not always as easy as it seems. And the geography of Taiwan makes it even more complicated than Ukraine. Ukraine is a flat country, you can just drive in. Taiwan is a mountain in the sea. So that's regarding an invasion. Already we're arguably at war because China is doing everything it can to beat up Taiwan, flying planes over Taiwan in a threatening manner, stopping from Taiwan from participating in international organizations like the World Health Organization, for which we all have an interest in Taiwan being there for global health. Trade sanctions against Taiwan, blocking Chinese tourists going there. Geopolitical analysts call these grey zone activities. So China is implementing many grey zone activities against Taiwan already and non-stop.
And are they things that you, having visited Taiwan, that you notice or can feel in the everyday?
I quite honestly, when I was there, I didn't see any such things. No, but just talking to people, it's this. You come from Ireland, I come from Australia. These are very peaceful countries. We're not sort of living at home, worrying about jets flying over and affecting our lives. Businessmen in our countries are not worried about threats from China, whereas the Taiwanese people live under a constant source of threat.
How does this issue get better, or how does it get solved?
There are two ways, and neither are probably very realistic. The Taiwanese people could cave in and just surrender, and there are some Taiwanese people who want to just do that, solve the problem by surrendering. But if they did that, of course, they would give up a democracy, become part of an authoritarian state. Taiwanese business people who do lots of business with Taiwan are very favourable to having good relations with China. They don't care about democracy. The other way it could be solved is if China changes its mind and gives up. But under the very hardline policy of Xi Jinping, it's very hard to see, for the moment, China giving up its claim to Taiwan.
Why is this issue important, and why would it be important to students?
Taiwan is probably the biggest hotspot in Asia, and Asia, of course, is the biggest part of the world economy. It has the world's biggest population, and so we would all be affected by that. I think for students who are interested in learning about the global system, global politics, global economy, this is the hottest issue and the most interesting issue. It's a nice case study.
Is there a way that students can help fight the problem or fix the issue in some way?
I guess by understanding the issue and being aware of the full issue, that can help shape public opinion in students' own countries. My own country, Australia, we are very sympathetic towards Taiwan. And our sympathy towards Taiwan is in part a reflection of public opinion, public support for democracy, human rights, and so on. We suffer from Chinese threats all the time too. And so, an influence on public opinion, I guess, would be it. But I mean, that's obviously very vague. Quite honestly, there's very little that any one individual can do to solve the problem.
And some of our students write themselves, or they're brought through the journalistic process when finding a story, researching it, writing it. When you've done that over your career, but maybe more particularly with this article, what did you learn while writing or researching this piece?
I learned more about the complexities of the whole situation. I was in Taiwan a month ago for a 10-day study tour with the Australian Institute of International Affairs. And before going there, I thought I understood the Taiwan situation. And I realized after visiting there, my previous knowledge was quite superficial. So I learned a lot about the whole situation, and that enabled me to write, I think, a fairly decent article.
How did you find the people or the experts to help you tell your story?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. Fortunately, the study tour I went on organised excellent meetings for us with different experts. So that was good. But, as a journalist, when I wrote for the Financial Times magazine, you just have to research around and find out who the important people are, send them emails and ask them if they'll meet you or whether they'll answer questions. In journalism, the key thing is the interview, meeting with people who are relevant to an issue and who are willing to speak about an issue, and meeting with people on both sides of an argument, not just one side. But to meet with people, you have to really buckle down and work hard and try and convince people that it's worth their bother to meet with you. And so that's part of the fun of journalism. Getting some important person who's willing to speak to you. It's not an easy part of the job, but it's a rewarding part of the job when you succeed.
And what would you say is the toughest part of the writing or reporting process?
Well, in journalism, when we write articles, they're always referred to as being stories. I think that term story is very meaningful because an article must have a story. It must have a narrative. It must have a message. When you start preparing for a story, you need to do as much reading as possible to find out about the background to it all. You have to meet with the people involved, but then you have to digest it and then come up with the story that you want to communicate. That's a challenge, but it's fun to do because it's when we're university students, often we have to write an essay. We just write the stuff. We often don't think about the person who's reading it. And as a journalist, the key thing is to think about the person who's reading it, making sure that the article is clear and understandable to them, and making sure the article has a story that they can absorb.
Has your approach to that process changed over the years?
Improved. Life is a learning process, and so greatly improved. But when you tackle a new topic, it's not easy.
If you had one tip to give budding journalists, what would that one tip be?
Well, ideally, you should be able to work in a subject area that is of interest to you. Don't always have that chance, but hopefully budding journalists can work in subject areas that are of interest to them. And once they get a job in that area, you have to read as much as possible in the area so that you know the background. And of course, talk to people who are very experienced, who can give you tips. And lots of older people like me are happy to share their experience with younger people. Look for a mentor who can help you. And don't be afraid to write. And when you're starting off in journalism, you might write a draft article, and then the boss rewrites the whole thing. And of course, some people get upset at that. They're emotionally attached to their words. You can't be like that. When the boss rewrites what you've done, you have to discuss with him what he did and why, and try and understand why, and study what he did to try and absorb why, and treat each article not just as a writing process, but as a learning process too.
Thank you very much for talking to us, John.
That was a great pleasure.